It's time to down tools for a bit. Welcome to the ToolShed, the influential podcast for anyone and everyone involved in the building industry. Here's your host, Mick Hawes.
Hey folks, welcome to another ToolShed podcast. In this episode, speaking to Ashley Belteky. And she's got a fascinating story. I'm not going to tell you too much. I'm going to let her tell you the story. But I wanted her on the podcast because we're always looking for people that are contributing to the betterment of trades industry, trades careers. And we've had a lot of ladies on the show that are promoting females in trades and so forth. But Ashley's wheelhouse is in leadership, which is just absolutely incredibly essential, and it's just inspiring to see a young lady getting into this space and kicking goals in this space. So really looking forward to hearing the story. Just before we do, I want to remind you to invest 90 seconds into the Builder's Scorecard. Every single business has a specific challenge that you're potentially not even aware of. You're that close to the coalface, you might not be aware of it. And so taking the Builder's Scorecard, you ask a few questions. As I said, it takes about 90 seconds, and it will give you a score out of the four essential areas of a business that it takes to manage effectively to be successful. Not only that, once you get your score, you'll also get some suggestions based on your score as to what you might need to work on first. And the real cool thing is when you work on it, it eliminates a whole raft of other issues. So it's a really effective way of moving forward quite quickly. So 90 seconds is the investment of time. It'll be absolutely worth it. So let's get on with this. Ashley, welcome to the podcast. I've been reading about you. I've been watching some of your videos, listening to some of your podcasts. It's extraordinary stuff for a young lady to get into this space and be making the noises that you're making about the topics that you're passionate about. It's, as I said, it's very inspirational. What I'd love to hear first is why. Like, how did you end up with such passion about leadership? I know that you said that you accidentally got a job as a diesel mechanic. A little bit similar to my story, I guess. I didn't become an electrician by accident. My dad just said, "There's an electrician coming to give you a job tonight. If you don't take it, you'll be working for me." So my choice was very simple, to become an electrician. What's your story? How did you end up becoming a diesel mechanic by accident?
So the accident, similar to you, was only an initial accident, and it was a very intentional choice.
Yeah.
So my journey started in year 10, where a local employer came to my school offering work experience. Now, I'd grown up in family business. I was doing well in school. I'd enjoyed working with my hands. So I signed up for this kind of trade-based opportunity without knowing what I'd signed up for. When someone finally told me I was going to be fixing trucks, I didn't want to go anymore. So no mechanics in the family, no interest in cars, and I didn't even know the difference between a flathead screwdriver or a Phillips head screwdriver. So I was pretty far out of my depth. Fortunately, my parents convinced me not to waste a perfectly good opportunity. And so I attended this week of work experience in overalls 3 times my size and wearing the heaviest pair of shoes I'd ever owned because it was steel in the steel cap boots. And I spent the week rebuilding an engine with a mechanic and a first-year apprentice. And it just sparked my curiosity. And I just kept following that all through high school. I still did my year 12 exams and achieved the second highest result in my school, but my passion and my interest was in the trades. So I followed that, and following my gut instincts and following what I'm interested in hasn't steered me wrong yet.
So I'm assuming that after that you applied for an apprenticeship as a diesel mechanic. Is that what's happened?
Yeah, after that very first week of work experience, I continued to test my interest. I didn't know outright. And what that meant was I did about 6 weeks of work experience in my final 3 years of high school. And that really allowed me to take my career for a test drive. So often when I'm speaking to students now, I'm constantly advocating for the value of work experience because it allowed me to make a really informed decision about what I wanted to do after school, because I was able to compare my work experience with going to universities and doing some of that exam prep work. And I'd sit in a lecture hall for a day and I absolutely hated it. So I really tested my interest and then applied for that apprenticeship with the same workplace I did the very first week of work experience. And I'd actually built my relationship with them over those 3 years because I kept going back to work in their workshop, working on diesel engines. And so I guess I kind of started my journey with that employer as a student that led into my apprenticeship. And then I continued to explore the industry after my apprenticeship in a few different, factors. So I started in transport, primarily rebuilding diesel engines, which was very niche. But then I went on to the mines because I was looking for a new challenge and a new environment. Tried that for about 18 months while running my own business with a trade school mate because I need something to do for my home swings. And then I ended up in construction after that, which by far is my favorite. I found that with all that testing, I really enjoyed the diversity of construction, that sometimes I'd be in a workshop and sometimes I'd be out on site. So I really got to work on a really diverse range of equipment and it really suited my interest in continuing to stay engaged in my trade.
So I'm fascinated as to why you took to the topic of leadership, because listening to you and reading some of the things you've written, you're obviously very passionate about leadership. It's incredibly essential in my view. It's not done very well in most cases. Was there something that you experienced through your trades-based apprenticeship and jobs later down the track that caused you to feel that I need to explore leadership or I need to teach leadership? How did you end up in that space?
I think it started very similarly to most people who find themselves leaning towards leadership or valuing leadership quite early in their career. I was running a trailer for my parents in the family business from about the age of 14. So I
Right.
kind of had some exposure around being the person with the knowledge to be guiding other people on how to get a job done. So, for context, my dad's a chef by trade and we catered wood fired pizzas. So, I did that every weekend from about the age of 12, starting from folding pizza boxes and being overwhelmed by that to running a trailer for my parents at 14. And then I continued working with them pretty much till the end of my apprenticeship. So, that kind of influenced, I guess, my existing relationship with leadership around having that kind of position of authority to provide guidance and instructions to get a job done. As an apprentice, being a woman in trade, as much as I was just happy being a tradie, I did find myself being pulled into those opportunities to advocate for more people to consider pathways into trades as women. And that did extend to then advocating for all students to consider trade pathways, because we do have a culture where the default seems to be university. And that's not necessarily the right pathway for many people, but they just think that that's what's expected of them. And so they don't explore trades as an option. So those, I guess, were kind of two foundational pieces to leadership for me. But the real catalyst was when I got a scholarship for a leadership program while I was in the construction sector. And it was a scholarship specifically designed for women in construction. I applied, wasn't even sure if I'd be eligible because I guess I had that blue collar role. I wasn't in a leadership position and I was a tradie. So I kind of felt like my trade isn't industry specific because it can apply to so many industries. But I got the scholarship, and pretty much the first step of that process was having a review on your leadership skills from a self-reflection point of view and also from anonymous feedback from the people you worked with, whether that was your peers or your managers. That feedback and the result of that survey probably broke my definition of leadership as being someone who takes initiative or someone with authority, because I realized that I didn't actually have as many leadership skills as I thought I did.
Mm.
And it really forced me to review what leadership meant to me and what skills you actually need as a leader. And by going into that scholarship as well, without being in a management position, I was really forced to recognize how I didn't have to wait to be a supervisor to step into that role of leader.
Yeah.
Leadership for me is very much about how we uplift other people and how we influence other people. And that was something that I'd already been doing through advocating as an apprentice, even by being a role model, because that's one type of leadership. And I was able to recognize that and recognize that I am the only person who I have control over. I control my actions. I choose how I show up. And if I take ownership of that and I choose to care about the impact I have on other people, that is a way I can step into my leadership now beyond just having that role model capacity for people who are considering trade pathways.
Yeah, wonderful. Many years ago, after we'd set up Builder's Business Black Belt, I was setting up a thing that ended up being called Blueprint, which is our sort of entry to the business coaching space, working out the fundamentals. And my business coach at the time asked me this question. I want to ask you the same question. He said, if you were only allowed to teach your builders 3 things and you weren't ever allowed to teach them anything else, what would be the 3 things that you would pick to teach them? And so my question to you is you've learned a lot about leadership. It's your focus. You talk about it a lot, and you're sort of contributing to this positive cause. But if I were to ask you that question, if there were 3 things about leadership that you could pass on to people to help them become a more effective leader, but they're the only 3 things you could ever talk about, what would be the 3 that you'd pick?
Wow. That's a really powerful question. And I'm sure that if you ask me this again when I've had more time to reflect, I'll
It'd be
probably
different.
have a completely different answer.
Yeah, that's right. It
But
took
my
a
instinct,
long time to get to the answer. So I don't expect the exact right answer, but it's a deep thinking question, isn't it?
definitely. And I feel like the first thing that comes to mind is something I've had to learn and struggled with a lot because I am quite an articulate person. I like writing, I like reading, I'm pretty natural at speaking. And so that's taught me to value my words. But what I've had to learn from a leadership perspective is that how we say something and how we show up is more important than what we're saying.
Yeah.
Because if you're saying something nice, but you're not looking at the person because you're too busy looking at your computer and there's no emotion, you're not smiling, and you just kind of give instructions without paying attention to that person, even if you have a perfectly good intention, if they don't interpret that intention, then you haven't really done your job in signaling to them that you are there to support them. And I think that's something that in a very busy environment as tradespeople, we get so busy and we've got so many things to prioritize. The simple act of giving someone attention, even for 20 or 30 seconds, to signal to them that we're listening, even if like we may be listening while we're doing something else, it can be really game changing. So being mindful of your body language and how you interact with someone and knowing that that's often more important than the words you say is probably the first thing I would say as a really powerful tip in terms of how you show up and how you influence other people.
Yep. Fantastic.
The second thing I definitely see and am having a lot of conversations about in my different working fields is around the generational gap we've currently got. We have an aging trades workforce and a young generation that doesn't seem to be as engaged as a young generation has historically been in terms of bringing them into these blue collar trade based roles. And when I speak to employers or apprentices and tradespeople about some of those barriers, what I tend to recognize is that we don't give each other much space and tolerance, and we're not practicing enough empathy. And it sounds pretty fluffy and like wishy-washy. How do you demonstrate tolerance and empathy? But I think as leaders, if we want to engage the next generation, and we also want to recognize that we have 2 very different work values across the generations, that what we really need in our workplaces is to practice more empathy and tolerance for our differences, for our different values. You know, you might have someone who wants to work 14 hours because they want the paycheck. You might have someone who wants to do that 8-hour day and go home. And we have to understand that even though it's a massive gray zone and there's no black and white answer for what's right, if we do practice being more empathetic and having more tolerance for those differences, we actually see more benefits from having diversity in our team. So something to be intentional about is very much thinking, how can you practice more empathy and tolerance and promote that within your team? I think the third thing would be that leadership is an internal game first, more than it is about our actions outwardly. Because at the end of the day, if we don't have some self-awareness or ability to self-regulate when we're having a bad day or when we're feeling stressed, we're going to manifest that or signal that to the other people in our team if we don't have good tools and strategies to lead ourselves and to show up authentically as ourselves.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying the podcast. We're always trying to bring you information that's going to make your life as a builder much easier. So give us a thumbs up and make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode. Yeah, brilliantly answered. We got, traditionally, if I would ask a question like that, someone would have got less lost after the first bit. We would have gone off track. I want to circle back to the second answer, because it is something that, speaking to our guys, many of the builders in Black Belt are, we could call them veteran, we could call them experienced, whatever, old fellas. And so quite often the conversation does come around that apprentices, lazy, hard to get them engaged and all of that sort of stuff. And I really understand what you said and how important it is to have empathy, because everyone has, the different generations have grown up through different seasons. Some have grown up when it was summer and some have grown up when it was winter, economically speaking, or just the way the world is. Everyone's grown up under different circumstances, different technologies, access to different things. So our conditioning is very, very different. What can you say? How can you help the more mature leader to be able to do what you said and practice empathy? Because I agree with it, and I think it's really important, but I think it's also important to give people the specific directions and tools to be able to do it. So if you're speaking to someone and helping them in that space, what do they need to do, change, think about?
I guess some groundwork before I answer that is that when it comes to leadership, there is no black and white answer. We're navigating a grey zone where everyone needs something different. So we have to constantly be learning and open to the fact that what might work for one person in our team might be the worst possible strategy for someone else. And we're going to make mistakes. And that's okay. That's how we learn. It's how we handle those mistakes when they come up. That's really important. And that's sometimes putting our ego aside and saying, you know what, I got that wrong, or I didn't word that well, I'm sorry. And it can be that simple. In terms of, I guess, bridging the gap and practicing empathy for that younger generation who does have this reputation around being lazy or being disengaged, we, from, I guess, the young person point of view, I definitely think we are, with more experience, need to be empowering them and helping them build resilience, because it is mostly what they're lacking. They're lacking the resilience to overcome those hurdles instead of just going and finding some easier job that maybe doesn't give them a very long career pathway the way a trades does. So in terms of building that resilience, it's about helping them overcome challenges, helping them work through mistakes, and creating that safe workplace environment where if they do make a mistake, that you're able to give them really constructive feedback that's not personal, that explains this is where you've gone wrong, this is what you should try next time, and empower them to actually try again. I definitely know I've struggled with making mistakes in the industry, and I've had a lot of emotional baggage around that. Growing up in a family environment where making a mistake was a pretty big deal, and the response to that might have been like criticism instead of constructive feedback to say, here's what you could have done better. So as leaders, if we want to step into our power and our authority as leaders, we have the capacity to be a good role model and a good influence to build the resilience of these young people. The way we do that is to take total responsibility for our lives and for ourselves. Now, that sounds pretty intimidating, but when we think about responsibility, it's not about blame, it's not about fault. It's about recognizing that whatever situation we become aware of or that we experience, we have an ability to respond, and we can choose whether we want to engage or not engage, but that's still a choice, and that's still us actively choosing how we're going to respond to that situation. So when we take total responsibility, if you have an apprentice who is disengaged, there's not necessarily a one-size-fits solution to getting them off their phone, getting them to stop sitting in the portaloo for hours as their way to get their phone used discreetly. What all you can control is how you respond to that. And the real question is, what is the outcome you want? Do you want to get rid of this apprentice and then have the same challenge when the next apprentice comes in with the same problem or the same issue? Or do you want to actually approach that person and instead of saying, hey, this isn't good enough, you shouldn't be on your phone, that conversation may need to happen in the future. But in practicing empathy first, it's often easier to go and approach with questions instead of statements. Is there a reason why, you're distracted? I've noticed that you're going to the bathroom a lot when we've got jobs to get done and we've got timeframes to meet. How can I help you stay engaged at work? If we come from that supportive approach first, knowing that the outcome we want to achieve is to support this young person to get engaged and to stay in their trade in the industry, that can be a better first step instead of going in really intense and saying like, this isn't good enough. We need you to be doing this job and being on your phone is not good enough. That conversation may still need to happen. But I think in terms of that empathy, approaching with questions first is a really good way to practice that. And also recognizing that it's our responsibility to choose how we respond to any situation. And we can choose to engage or not engage. But we can also choose if we approach more empathetically with questions to try and understand what they may be thinking or experiencing instead of just assuming that they're in the toilet because they're lazy.
Yeah. Point 3 that you made, at least what I took from it, was that to be an effective leader of others, we first must learn to lead ourselves. That's what I took from what you said. I'd love you to expand on that thought, because I believe that the majority of, and I'm using air quotes for the people that, when this is an audio only podcast, lead their business because they are the owner of the business. They might be a builder or a chippy or a trades, a sub trade, whatever. And they take on the role of leadership because they own the business. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they would be an effective leader. And much of that is many people cannot lead themselves. They cannot discipline themselves and make effective choices and step back and look at things from a point of view to get the best outcome, rather than doing what you said there, just tearing strips off people or what have you. How important is it for leaders to understand first I must learn to lead myself before before I start to become a leader of others? What are your thoughts there?
We are always going to be limited by how well we know or lead ourselves when it comes to leading others. And the reason I say that is because when it comes to leadership, it's about being really intentional with how we influence or impact others. And what it takes to be intentional is to know ourselves, including the good parts about ourselves, the not so great parts about ourselves, and obviously any gaps we have. When we're so busy in life and, we've got customers calling and we're trying to manage staff and there's family stuff going on at home, often we're just reacting to all this stimulus that's coming in instead of actually choosing who we want to be.
Yeah.
So when I talk about leading ourselves, it's really about finding the time to slow down, even if all you have is 10 minutes a day, to actually get to know ourselves and to choose how we want to show up for ourselves. Because I think what often happens is when life gets so busy and we've got so many stresses, especially when we're in business or when we're leading, we often end up just reacting with our default reactions to everything. If someone's broken something and we're an angry person, we're going to yell. For me, I'm not a very angry person, but what that meant was I often would be too happy and I'd have a negative impact in my workplace because I was almost creating toxic positivity because I didn't know when to actually dial that down. So we each need to get to know ourselves and choose who we want to be, understand our values so that we can act in alignment with them, And when we do that, we're able to look at ourselves more objectively and also recognize the impact that we're going to have on other people. If we're just reacting all the time, we don't actually choose the kind of leader we want to be. We're just reacting on defaults that we've learned from our upbringing, that we've learned from how we've responded to growing up in the workforce. And we just become a product of our environment instead of a product of who we are inside.
Yeah. Behind you is a poster, Tradies Who Leave. You're a podcaster as well. You've got the podcast and it's called Tradies Who Lead. Tell us about the podcast. What's the purpose of the podcast? What's the focus of the podcast? And where do we find the podcast? I'm assuming it'll be all normal places, Spotify and the rest, but what caused you to get into podcasting and what's the focus of this tool for you?
I think across the many industries I've worked across in whether that was mining or construction or transport, I've met so many tradespeople who want to be better leaders, but don't have the time and just don't know where to start. And for myself, I've also used the podcast as a way to educate myself, because what I love about the blue collar industry is the camaraderie we have. And when I thought about, well, how can I improve as a leader? How can I learn from this community around me and people who are doing better than I am, who are leading a team and maybe have those more official leadership roles, but also people who are at the ground level, they're on their tools and they're a leader through being a mentor or by being a trainer. Because there's so many different types of leadership, the purpose of the podcast really is around trying to break down, I guess, some of the preconceived ideas we have around leadership as being the person who might be a supervisor or a manager, and to help everyone understand that we each have the power to lead our own lives and be everyday leaders, regardless what role or position we're in, but also an opportunity to be able to learn more about other people's type of leaderships and the tips and tricks that they might be using in a really quick, concise way with short podcast episodes so that we can continue to improve in our own leadership practices. So like you said, it's available on all the usual platforms, Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, and the videos go up on YouTube as well. You can also check it out on social media on Instagram and TikTok.
Yeah, brilliant. So I want to invite you into my time machine. We jump in and we move ahead 5 years from now and we're back on the podcast. And as I was formulating this question, I was just wondering what sort of equipment we'd be using in 5 years' time. How we'd be recording a podcast. Would they even exist in this form? But we're having a conversation regardless. And I'm going, what's happened in the last 5 years as far as, Tradies Who Lead and what you're doing to inspire people and spread the word of effective leadership. What will we see in the next 3 to 5 years from you?
Well, without spilling all my secrets, definitely watch this space, because a podcast is just one means to create that learning experience around leadership in a really accessible, time-efficient way for tradespeople. I'm looking at how we can continue to achieve that outcome and continue to support our community to not only value leadership, value people skills as much as we value technical skills. So the podcast is one piece of the puzzle, and there will be more stuff coming in the coming years. So if I look back on this podcast in 3 or 5 years, the Tradies Who Lead purpose will be extended and the messaging will still be the same, that our people skills are just as important as our technical skills if we want to lead our own lives, have a positive influence on our workplaces, but also empower the next generation to join the trades and thrive as well.
Wicked. I have read that you do keynote speaking, and I think you'd be amazing at that. You've obviously got the podcast, we just spoke about that, but you also do consultation. So who are the people that would reach out to you for leadership consultation? What does that look like? And what's the first step? Well, how do they get a hold of you?
So the best way to get a hold of me would be through social media or my website, which is ashleybelteky.com. And when it comes to leadership consultation, it's very much about understanding where someone is and what either ideas need to be challenged to help them transform their leadership in their own lives, to also then help set a vision about what kind of leader do they want to be Because once we have that leadership vision about how we want to show up in our own lives, whether that's at work or outside of work, that's what actually helps guide the actions that we might take to get closer towards that person that we want to become, that's true to our souls and also has a positive influence on the people around us.
So we'll definitely have the website link in the description so people can just click that, go to the website, and from there you can find the podcast, although you could probably find it just by doing a search on Spotify or the normal places where you get your podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. You're an absolute inspiration, and we need many, many more people like you talking about this message and leading from the front, like the leadership example that you set, the way you speak, the way you hold yourself, and the commitment to learning and helping others in such an important area of not just business but of life, such as leadership, is absolutely inspirational. I can't say that enough. So thank you for being on the show. And I don't have a time machine, but I'm sure that we want to catch up with you in the future and find out what has transpired for sure.
Thank you so much for having me. It definitely sounds like a plan.
So that's it, folks, for this episode. What an inspirational young lady. The link is in the description. Just click on the link, go and check out ashleybelteky.com. Listen to the podcast, and there is a lot of wisdom there for such young years. There's so much wisdom there that you can take away to help you with leadership of yourself and also leadership of your business, which is absolutely critical to business success. So jump on that website and have a cruise around. Check out the blogs, check out the podcast, some really cool information there. As I said, that's it for this podcast. Before we get out of here, quick reminder to hit the link in the description to take the Builders Scorecard. You'll get a score in momentarily after you finish the answering the questions, and then you'll also get a PDF, a custom PDF based on your answers that will give you some really cool guidelines as to what you can work on next. So it's a great way to move forward fast. That's it for this episode. I'm Mick Hawes from Builders Business Black Belt. We'll be back with another episode before you know it. That is all. I'm out. Bye for now.
You've been listening to the ToolShed. If this podcast struck a chord with you, make sure you spread the word by sharing it with your mates in the building industry. We love your help to make the building industry better for everyone involved.